It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
If we do things because we think they're going to make us happy, we will often, not always, but we will often be disappointed.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
Hello, this is Dr. Justin Coulson, the founder of happyfamilies.com.au. It's a Monday morning. Kylie, my wife, mum to our 6 kids, podcast partner, is sitting opposite me yawning, because that's what Mondays are for, right? Big weekend, honey.
I can't believe you're dobbing me in.
A big weekend. Bit tough. Woke up a bit late this morning.
Just a little.
Not feeling great. We are so grateful that you've chosen to join us today. We're having a conversation about whether or not we're responsible for our kids' happiness. When I ask this question in workshops, it's the number one response. The question is, what do you want most for your kids? And everyone always says,
I want them to be happy.
I hear it again and again and again. And today I want to bust the myth that it's our responsibility to make our kids happy. In fact, I want to expose the lie that it is that we need to make our kids happy. I want to argue that that's not our job. Not that I'm suggesting that we're therefore here to make our children miserable. That's not it either.
I think that we have just lightened the load of every parent ever.
Oh, but we need to explain why. And so what we're going to do, because you're not feeling 100% today, is I've put together a list of 5 things that go wrong when we try to help our kids to be happy, when we think that it's our responsibility. So you can sort of just join in the conversation around that, but I don't want to put too much of a load on you, because it's not my job to make you happy or your job to make me happy. And then, I just thought of a 6th one. And then after the break, we're going to play around with what we are actually responsible for. If we're not responsible for our children's happiness, what are we as parents responsible for other than clothing and feeding and sheltering them?
Well, let's dive into it. What's the first one?
The first one is that if you think that you're responsible for your children's happiness, you're often going to make short-sighted decisions.
I think about this all the time, because I can't even count the amount of times that we've taken the kids on an outing or, spent a whole heap of money that we probably really didn't have, but we were desperate to put a smile on their face and, spend quality time together as a family, only to get in the car or maybe not even make it to the car after a wonderful day out and have someone griping because there's not enough legroom on the car, or the sibling next to them is breathing in their air, or whatever it is. It just blows out of proportion after all of that effort that we've gone into.
I'm thinking theme parks, right?
Oh.
You take the kids to the theme park because we want you to have an awesome day, but they fight on the way to the theme park. They fight and whinge and complain because you're not...
And they don't want to go on that ride. They want to go on this ride.
And I want to sit next to dad, not mum.
Yeah.
And then when you take your picnic lunch because you're not prepared to spend $46
But I want the chips!
on one burger and chips, plus an extra $12 if you want the 40 cents worth of soft drink that you have to buy. And the kids whinge and whinge and whinge, and you're thinking, but I did this so that you would be happy. And that right there is the problem. But we make all of these short-sighted decisions. The kids are whinging, and so we say, well, I just want you to be happy so you don't have to go to school today. Or the kids are whinging and we say, well, I just want you to be happy, so yes, I'll buy you that treat in the supermarket. It's short-sighted decisions that don't actually make the kids happy. Like, let's say you do let them stay home. Are they actually happy? Let's say you do buy them the treat. Do they treat everyone well? Like, are they happy after that? It just doesn't work out that way. So we make short-sighted decisions when we think that we're responsible for our children's happiness, and it rarely works to anyone's real advantage.
What's number 2?
The second one is that it's impossible to satisfy our children's craving for happiness.
Insatiable.
It is. There's a psychological reference to the hedonic treadmill. So hedonism is avoiding pain and seeking pleasure. And when you get on the hedonic treadmill, what happens is you get something that feels really good, and then you keep on chasing more and more of that good stuff. You become acclimatized, you become accustomed, you become habituated to all of the goodness in your life. And as you become familiar and comfortable with all of the stuff that made you happy once, it's no longer enough. It doesn't make you happy anymore. You need more.
Yes, I'm thinking about the multiple times I may have read 15 books at bedtime instead of 1 because it just was never enough. And now that we've got a 7-8-year-old who is
reading on her own,
reading chapter books,
yep.
1 chapter is not enough. We're up to 3 chapters a night, Dad.
I fall asleep. I fall asleep when they ask me to read because I just can't read that long at night. Once I'm horizontal. Anyway, it's impossible to satisfy. So when you think that you're responsible for your kids' happiness, you keep on pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, which it's just too much, which kind of leads to my third idea, and that is that being responsible for somebody's happiness is actually an impossible burden to carry. Because your kids are always going to have experiences, not always, but your kids are going to end up being mad or sad or bad, feeling horrible, and then you feel like it's your job to make it all better. And I don't know if this is helpful or not, but I want to make it really clear. It's not your job to make it better. As a parent, you don't have to fix it because they're feeling bad. You don't have to fix it because they're feeling sad. You don't have to fix it because they're feeling mad. What you do need to do is let them know that you get it, and that you're there to support them as they figure it out. But what we do is we sit there on the carpet, laying beside our children, reading chapter 4 and chapter 5, because we just want them to be happy. We just want them to know that we're there for them. We just want to connect with them. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't connect and that we shouldn't enjoy quality time together, but it becomes pathological once we start to think that we're responsible for their happiness, and if they're not feeling happy, that we are the ones who are responsible to do something about it.
Well, and the
so
guilt settles in.
Right.
You know, and then we're burdened by the fact that our children are unhappy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's number 4?
Number 4 is that when we think that we are responsible for our children's happiness, we actually set them up to fail in life. Because if they think that their happiness, that their emotional stability, that their emotional well-being is predicated on somebody outside of themselves, what are they going to do when we're not around? What are they going to do when they're at university or when they're in a relationship with another adult? Are they going to think that that other person is responsible for their happiness? Are they going to think that it's all that other person's fault that they're not having a good day? I mean, sometimes other people can interfere with our otherwise best laid plans and we can feel like we're having a bad day, but we're actually setting our children up to fail because they're looking to external sources to satisfy their sense of well-being. And it's so unhealthy. It's not going to be in anyone's best interest.
It's interesting that you brought this one up because it's something that I've actually really only come to fully understand as an adult, that concept that this is actually my gig. It's up to me. But for so long, I looked to external sources to kind of get that lift and that happy. And I didn't like being on my own, not because I don't enjoy being in my own space, but I just love being with other people. But I was relying on them to make me feel good.
Yeah. And that brings me to the last thing, and that is that nobody can actually make you feel good. Like, I can't make somebody happy. I can't make somebody sad. I can certainly treat people in a particular way that is going to make it easier for them to choose one thing or the other. But something that I have noticed, I mean, we've made no secret of it over the last few weeks. We've had some particularly challenging times with one of our children, but a couple of our kids have been giving us a bit of a rough old time. And one thing that has come back to me again and again and again is that I'm not responsible for their happiness and they can't make me miserable. So I can give them all the love and compassion in the world, but ultimately when I step out of that room, it's on me how I feel. It's on me how I react. It's on me whether it gets me down or whether I say, well, that's the way they are right now, but that doesn't mean I have to be miserable as well.
I think it takes a level of maturity to get to that point.
And it's one that I've been trying to make with our children somewhat unsuccessfully for some time now. I keep on saying, your sister's not responsible for your happiness. And they're like, yes, she is. They're convinced that their sisters are the ones that are making them angry, that are making them sad, that are making them mad. And it's that consistent water torture, just that little drop once and then once again and once again of me saying, you choose, you choose, you choose. After the break, if we are not responsible for our children's happiness, what are we responsible for? Imagine a relationship where you felt seen, heard, and valued. One where, as your partner enters the front door, they see you and their eyes light up. A relationship like that is a gift. If you don't have it now, you can. The Happy Families webinar, Better Together, gives you the insight, tools, and support you need to have a happier relationship. Available now at the Happy Families webshop.
It's the Happy Families podcast, the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now. And I'm curious, if we're not responsible for our kids' happiness, what are we responsible for, Dr. Coulson?
The first thing I'm going to say is that we're responsible for teaching our children to find their own happiness. And they're most likely to find it not by searching for it. If we do things because we think they're going to make us happy, we will often, not always, but we will often be disappointed. In fact, happiness often comes from the anticipation of something, not doing it. You struggle with this one, don't you? I've talked about this before with the chocolate cake analogy. The anticipation of the chocolate cake is actually often better than the chocolate cake itself. It's the excitement of the trip that's quite often better than the trip itself. Not always, but our brain gets so excited about things. You're looking at me like, I still don't buy it.
When you say a holiday, I agree with that wholeheartedly. More times than not, the actual living through a holiday is not anywhere near as good as I imagined it would be.
Right.
Especially if the kids are involved.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
But I'm still going to say that eating the chocolate cake is better than anticipating it.
You've always said that since the first time I shared this idea with you. But we are responsible for helping our kids to find their own happiness. And there's a handful of ways that we can do that. The first one is we need to teach them how to understand their emotions.
Yeah, this is a big one. I think that so often, especially as kids, but I think even as adults, we get so overwhelmed by the emotion, we don't even know what it is. And so helping them to understand it helps them to recognize that they actually have control over it.
Right. And that's the critical thing. Nobody else can make you feel happy or sad. And when you start to understand how your emotions are working, that your emotions are just giving you information and that you can accept that information or you can argue against it, that there are different ways to deal with the emotional information that's coming through your system. As that starts to resonate for your children, they start to learn how to regulate those emotions better and choose for themselves how they want to be presenting in the world, how they want to be showing up. Critically important. So we've got to help our kids to understand emotions. Usually we're going to do that best by emotion coaching. While emotion coaching, especially as suggested by Professor John Gottman, is often well done in the moment, my experience with our kids has been that it doesn't work so well in the moment. My experience with you is that it doesn't work so well in the moment. Sometimes it does, but it takes a lot of practice. It's a really heavy skill to learn. It takes a lot to learn to do it, especially in the moment. But emotion coaching doesn't have to take place just when someone's emotional. You can deal with the emotion coaching process much more effectively, sometimes after the emotional outburst, when things have calmed down, or a week later or a day later or whatever it might be. Another way that we can help our children to find their own happiness is to teach them how to have positive relationships. Teach them what a real friend is like, what a real friend is not like, how to deal with conflict and control issues, how to repair relationships when they go wrong. When we learn how to do those things, or when our kids learn how to do those things and get better at the social interactions that they're involved with, when their relationships improve, they're going to be happier.
As you shared that, I remembered a couple of instances where our children have had pretty significant falling outs with their friends and they've come home just a mess. Whether it be you or I, we've got them in the car, we've driven them up the road and they've been able to go knock on the door of their friend. And literally just that process has been, it's just so beautiful to watch it because they're upset and they're burdened by what they're feeling. And if they don't face it, it just festers and they create a mountain out of what was probably a molehill to start with. And every single time, these two girls have just crashed into each other and given each other a big hug and cried and said sorry and life goes on. And
that ties in with the next idea that I wanted to share. If you want to help your kids to be happier, not only do they need to get relationships right and learn how relationships work and how to have good relationships, but they need to learn how to do hard things. And saying sorry or asking for help, they're hard things to do. But can I just give you huge kudos on what you've just described? I hope that every parent who's listened to this podcast heard what you just said and got it. When the kids are fighting with a friend, sometimes instead of just leaving them to figure it out for themselves, sometimes the best thing you can do is stick them in the car and drive them to their friend's house and go knocking on the door and say, oh, my kid needs to talk to your kid. Can we just get them together for a minute? You've done that a handful of times with our kids over the years. and relationships are restored. But it's doing hard things. If you want your kids to be happy, you can't give them an easy life. You've got to give them the opportunity to do things that are hard, to invent or to get curious or to push their limits or to try and to fail and to, memorize lines in a musical or learn how to play an instrument or get good at a sport or practice an art, do karate, whatever it is. Doing hard things makes us happy. I mean, I know the kids whinge and whine and complain and say, this is the worst, I hate this, I can't stand doing this, I don't want to do this anymore. And yet, by pushing through those hard times, they tend to be so grateful and tend to be much happier because they did something hard. It builds resilience, it builds self-efficacy, it builds confidence, it builds satisfaction. It actually creates happiness as a byproduct, not as an end in itself.
I love it. What's number 5?
The last one is that we need to teach them to be responsible for their own emotions, for their own happiness, which is kind of the recurring theme of this podcast. They get to choose. They get to choose if they're going to be angry. And we've had this conversation with our kids so many times. You know what? You get to choose. You get to choose if you want to lay here and be miserable or if you want to get up and come and join us and be happy. And every now and again, our kids have looked at us and said, I choose misery.
Yes, they do.
I'm like, okay, that's your choice. We're going to go out there and we're going to smile and have a great time because we love being together. When you feel like doing that, come and join us. They get to choose.
But if we're being completely transparent, every now and again, you and I choose misery too.
We do, because we're human. Like I've done a few times over the last couple of weeks because it's been hard. But we really hope that these ideas are helpful for you and your family. When we think that we're responsible for our kids' happiness,
or anyone's for that matter,
we make short-sighted decisions. We put an impossible load on our own shoulders. We set our children up to fail. We will never actually satisfy them anyway. And all we do is kind of soothe ourselves in the moment, make ourselves feel like we're doing a good job, but we're not. What we're responsible for is helping our kids to find their own happiness, not by searching for it, but by understanding their emotional world, by practicing healthy relationships, by doing hard things, by repairing relationships, and by being responsible for their own emotions.
It's a big list.
Well, it's not supposed to be easy, Mrs. Happy Families. I'm not responsible for people being happy to have heard it. I just want to share the ideas. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. And if you'd like more information about how to make your family happier, you can find a whole lot of content about the stuff we're sharing in this podcast on our Facebook page, Dr. Justin Coulson's Happy Families.